It's definitely a challenge, being able, like, figuring out how to leverage reviews. Positive reviews are great because they tell you what you're doing right. Negative reviews give you insight into what needs improvement.
You are listening to And I Quote, a podcast focused on building relationships with insurance agents, brokers, their small business clients, and industry leaders. This podcast is presented by Coterie Insurance.
With your hosts, Brian Thomas, Director of Claims Experience, and Ann Boger, VP of Scaling. We will be exploring the power that connection, communication, and commitment can have on your business. Join us every Thursday for a new episode and topic that will provide key insights to help build your business, agency, and client relationships. And I quote.
Hi, and welcome to the And I Quote podcast. My name is Paige Janiszewski, and I am the social media strategist here at Coterie Insurance. So I'm a new face here. I'm usually behind the scenes producing this episode, but your co-host, Brian, who was supposed to record this episode, had to leave early for paternity leave because the baby came a little bit early, which is so exciting, and I am very happy to be here to interview Katy Kelly, Director of Marketing at Talage. And she's here today to talk to us about the very hot topic of online reputation. Katy, welcome to And I Quote.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this topic because I know a lot of people have questions about it.
Yes, me too. So before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and Talage.
Awesome. So as you mentioned, my name is Katy Kelly, and I'm the Director of Marketing at Talage. I've been here for a little over 2 years. And what we do is really exciting. We're an insurtech platform, and we're really the way we see ourselves is the API solution for quoting and binding commercial insurance. So we have more than 30 carrier integrations on the platform, and they deliver instant bindable quotes across 5 product lines, and we're increasing that all the time. So we're increasing the number of carriers and the number of products that we have on the platform. And we have our platform is leveraged by agents and wholesale brokers, carriers, and other technology providers. So it's really a total solution for the entire commercial industry.
That's awesome. So what do you love about what you do?
So what I love about marketing is I've actually had the opportunity I've been in the business for about 10 years, and I've had the opportunity to work across a number of different industries. So every time I work in a new industry, I get to learn all about it, and it just adds to my skill set. But I think the most fun part about working in marketing is being able to face a new challenge every day and figuring out how to solve it. So definitely not ever getting bored with marketing. So even though a lot of the tactics and activities that we do are the same, there's always new challenges, which is really cool.
So how long have you been in insurance marketing then, specific to this?
Yeah, so the same amount of time I've been with Talage. Talage was my introduction to insurance, and specifically commercial insurance. Many, many years ago, I worked in a different industry. I worked in the healthcare industry, so I did have some familiarity with like the health insurance side. But really being on this tech side and the commercial insurance has just been a little bit over 2 years.
So let's dive into online reputation. Why is this so important? And can you first also explain what exactly what online reputation means?
Yeah, so I would say that in its simplest form, an online reputation is basically the image of your brand or your company. So this could sometimes include like internet personalities. They don't necessarily have a company, but they're still a brand. And so they have their online reputation. But it's really how you project yourself to the online world. It's usually via social media, but a lot of times it can also include like news and publications, press releases. One of the big pieces that affects your online reputation are reviews and review sites. And it even like what shows up on in your search engine rankings, like when somebody searches on Google and Bing, that's all part of your online reputation. And I would say, so that's what it is. And why it's important is because if you think about how you act in your daily life, everybody searches online, whether it's Google's most popular search engine. but some people still use like Bing or Yahoo. And even these days, a lot of social media sites are considered like a search engine because they have so much data and information on them. So everyone's searching online for something. And you have to think about, if you're searching online, so is everybody else. And so people will look online and see what they can find out about you long before they ever do business with you. So they want to know what you're like to interact online, how responsive you are to your customers and things that are being said, what other people are saying about you. So it's really important that you establish an online reputation. And the first way to do that is you have to be able to be found online. Otherwise, nobody's even going to know you exist, right? So a long time ago, everybody found out about companies by word of mouth, right? Referrals, people talking. And then you had this flood of like advertisements, and people would do all the advertising and like the yellow pages, which is a thing probably a lot of younger people are not familiar with, but I'm sure with a lot of veterans in the insurance industry are very familiar with. And those things don't really exist anymore. I mean, you still have word of mouth, and that's really important. But the online world is an extension of that word of mouth. It's what people are saying about you. And so while you can't control everything that's said about you online, it is really important that you understand what's being said so that you can help protect and manage your online reputation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is so important to manage your reputation. And I love how you brought up referrals and word of mouth and the yellow pages. Surprisingly, it's brought up more often than not on this podcast. I think maybe a few of our episodes we talked about the yellow pages. Wow. So yes, I know, right? But back to online reputation, you talked about how important it is to manage it. Can you talk about best practices for handling negative reviews?
One of the things to keep in mind when you are responding online is that nothing is ever truly deleted from the internet. And so if you say something, make sure that it's something that you would want shown publicly, because there's a good chance it could end up public. So that's important to keep in mind. Other things that can affect your online reputation are tech problems. So a lot of times you'll see this with like banks or streaming services or e-commerce where like their sites go down. That's not something that's necessarily their fault, but they do have to manage that. And it does affect their reputation. So it's important that like if something happens that you respond to it and you respond quickly to it. Other things that can affect your reputation are things like misinformation, just like gossip. It can spread like wildfire. So again, being in those places where the conversations are happening can help you basically put out that fire and prevent it from spreading. And then security breaches. No industry is immune from a security breach. So it's really important that you have a plan for how to handle when it happens, because these days it's more an when, not if, and addressing it with your customers. Because if something happens and you just ignore it or don't, that can do a lot more damage to your reputation online and in the world in general than if you just addressed whatever it was that happened. So you mentioned handling negative reviews. So there's a lot of talk out there about what to do, how to do it. There are companies out there that specialize in addressing negative reviews. And the short of it is there is nothing that those companies do that you can't do yourself. The challenge is the time and energy that it takes to address it. One of the first things that you should know is that you cannot remove bad reviews. It just isn't going to happen. In fact, a lot of the review sites have policies in place that specifically call out that you can't, like business owners cannot change, edit, delete, or remove reviews. And that is supposed to lend itself to the credibility of the review site in that it doesn't pick and choose what gets said. That being said, how you should respond to those reviews. Here's some best practices that I have. Never respond when you're emotional, particularly angry, because you will always say something that you really wish you hadn't said. Now, even though you shouldn't respond when you're emotional, it's really important that you take time to craft a diplomatic response, but you can't wait too long. It can't go by a week or 2 weeks. You've got to respond quickly to these. So my suggestion is always take a look at what was said, let out your frustrations privately, and then figure out how you're going to respond in a way that's diplomatic and addresses their concerns without engaging them in an argument or a fight. One of the best things that you can do is actually face the accusation or the claim or the bad review face on. Don't ignore it, but address what it is that is at the root of their concern, and then tell them how you're going to fix it. Whether that's, hey, saw your review, that's not how we want to do business. I'm going to reach out to you privately and address how we're going to handle that. Or say, I'm so sorry that happened to you, but I'd really love a chance to make that right. Let's connect. Something like that, to say, hey, I hear you. Because the biggest thing, and a lot of the reasons that people leave negative reviews, is because they haven't felt heard. And if you give your customers an opportunity to feel heard, it can go a long way to mitigate and address the negative reviews. You can always attempt to reach out to the reviewer. This is great if you actually know this person, meaning for an insurance agent, it's likely that they're a customer and you have their contact information. So a simple phone call, email, hey, I saw what you posted online. I'd really like to discuss how we can resolve it, right? But you want to be careful, because there's a fine line between reaching out and harassment. Like, you don't want to harass them, say, hey, you need to respond to me. Going back to not responding when you're emotional, never respond with cursing, abusive language, or even don't even call them a liar. You just want to be the bigger person and say, I want to address this for you. Because how you respond, people will see that. You don't necessarily need to call them out on how and why they're wrong. The way that you respond actually goes a lot more than whether or not you were able to resolve the issue. And then there's the whole, can you delete bad reviews? So as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of review sites that actually don't allow you to delete those. In rare cases, you can submit I don't know if it's a complaint, but you can reach out to the review site and say, hey, can you remove this? And they will manually review the review that was done. And if it violates their terms, then they will go ahead and take it down. That rarely happens. So I wouldn't count on that as a rule of thumb. But there are other places where you do have control. So say on your Facebook page, somebody leaves a comment. You do have the ability to delete those comments and block people. And there's a lot of debate back and forth among marketers mostly about whether or not you should do that. And a lot of business owners that I've dealt with are all about just delete it, get rid of it. We're not going to deal with it. But the problem that presents is that you're not being transparent. People can't see how you're going to respond. And so it can end up having a negative effect rather than responding and saying, hey, I want to address this.
Yeah, definitely. So you also mentioned responding in a timely manner. Do you have any advice on how agents can do this? I mean, they have so much on their plate. So now we're adding the management of online reputation. How can they remember to check these review sites?
Yeah, so that is always the challenge. Even business owners aside, any marketer, any person who's responsible for this, that's always the challenge. And the way that you need to think about it is that an online review is about your business and is about your reputation. And by investing the time into checking these sites, you're actually investing in your business and making sure that it can flourish and be the best that it can be. So the best way to do it is schedule time on your calendar. I think that that's the easiest way, because it blocks out time that doesn't get blocked by something else. And then you have to choose to incorporate that as part of your process. It's a lot easier if you are an agency that has some kind of marketing social media person that you can assign this to. But if you're small enough that like you're the only person, it really does fall on your shoulders to make the commitment, choose to do it, and see it not as like a chore, but as you invest, as something that you're investing in your business by doing.
Yep, that's very well said. And I know I block off time in my calendar still, and it's part of my job. So I 100% agree. Just having it in there is so important.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about negative reviews, but there is positive online reputation out there as well. So how important is it to respond to the positive comments as well? Would you rank them the same, or always respond to the negative first? What are your opinions on that?
Yeah, so I think it's just as important to respond to the positive reviews as you do the negative reviews. And when we say review, this is really any kind of online commentary that happens. So whether that's on a Facebook post that somebody comments on, or if they're on Yelp and they left a review there, I think it's important to show your gratitude when somebody leaves a really positive review, as it is to address the concerns of those who leave negative reviews. So it depends on how often you plan on checking it. If you have somebody dedicated to marketing, they might be able to check it once a day, or it might be once a week. I probably wouldn't go as long as a month because there's a lot that can happen in a month, but I would just respond to them in the order that they showed up. And it doesn't take long to say thank you.
So we talked about, in general, you said social media platforms are good to check. We talked about Yelp briefly, and we dived into specifically Facebook as a social media platform. Are there any other review sites that you know of that should be checked on the weekly basis?
So there are some new review sites out there. There's a company called Trustpilot, and a lot of people use them to establish authenticity and drive trust because they manage all the reviews. And I've seen them integrate directly with websites, so that's really good. I think a lot of people just use like Yelp when they want to complain about a company. I think sometimes people think, oh, that's just for food, but it really isn't. Like you can find any company on there now. I think that's probably one of the bigger ones. I would say those are probably the top ones.
So all in all, I would love to end the conversation talking about taking these reviews and all of your positive online reputation that is out there and sharing it. So there is so much value in getting this review, but how do you get it in front of more people's eyes? Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah. It's definitely a challenge, figuring out how to leverage reviews. Positive reviews are great because they tell you what you're doing right. Negative reviews give you insight into what needs improvement, which can sometimes be challenging for people because it can be a bit of an ego check. First and foremost is you just need to be where the conversations are, right? You need to block out time and be where they are and listen. That's the biggest thing, right? Is a lot of time we're quick to respond, but we're not actually listening and hearing what people are saying. And I think that if we see it as investing in the business, then we can take that emotion out of it and say, okay, what can I learn from this? One of the other things that you can do with some of these reviews is I briefly mentioned that you can, like with Trustpilot, and I think even to some extent Google reviews and Yelp, is you can display these reviews on your website. There's some integrations that are pretty easy to connect the systems. And that helps show authority and trust, and it builds social proof, basically saying that other people believe in you, and so they can trust you doing business with you. One of the great things that you can do with a positive review is actually use it for a case study or a way to show, again, proof that what you do brings value. So you could reach out to customers who've left good reviews and say, hey, can I use you as either a quote or as a case study or as another, you could even, with permission, use them in advertising and different things like that. So that can go a really long way to helping build your reputation online. One of the things that people don't really realize is that reviews can actually give you insight into keywords and ways that people find you and things that they're thinking about. And so it can be really helpful for creating content for your website, which is one of the cues that Google uses to help rank you. And it can also help with some product improvements. It can help with messaging, different things like that. And then one of the best ways to use reviews is to using those reviews is to generate an FAQ page. So Google, again, going back to content, Google and search rankings, Google really values FAQs. And so if you can use these reviews to develop frequently asked questions for your website and answer the questions that people are always having, it's not just helpful for Google, but it also helps your customers and potential customers, and can actually lead to other content ideas for you.
That's awesome. That was so much information. This is going to be a really tough episode to edit down. I cannot wait to dive in. As I mentioned, I'm usually producing the episode, so I'm usually taking notes. So this is going to be one that I'm going to have to listen to all the way through and retake notes, but I can't wait to do that. Thank you so much, Katy, for being on the And I Quote podcast.
Thank you so much, Paige, for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining us today and listening to And I Quote, a podcast created by Coterie Insurance for insurance agents, brokers, and small business owners just like yourself. And I Quote focuses on how building relationships, networking, and community involvement can grow your business. Coterie Insurance is simplifying small business insurance for agents, brokers, and our partners. New to our website is the Find an Agent tab. This tab leads to local pages that help small business owners find agents in their area. If you're interested in getting your own page, click the link in our show notes. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next week.